One, two, three, four.
Having cyst on the ovary on sonography does not make you a PCOD patient. We can't just talk about masturbation without talking about sex and orgasm. A lot of women are using sex toys to masturbate so they can also have their orgasm without the pressure being on the man. The name of sex education should be changed to intimacy education. बच्चों को सेक्स दिखाने वाले और हमारे बच्चों की तो बुद्धि भ्रष्ट हो जाएगी.
Welcome to another episode of Conversations over Black Coffee, and today I have with me Dr. Asawari, who's a consulting gynecologist and infertility specialist. So without any further delay, let's start the episode. Hello Dr. Asawari, how are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me here today, Rohan.
So I want to know about your journey into medicine. I know that you come from a family of doctors. So I just wanted to know, why did you decide to become a doctor in the first place?
Well, Rohan, I actually grew up in a hospital. So for me, there was absolutely no other career path but to become a doctor. My mother's a gynac and my dad's a surgeon. So again, I knew that the OT was the way to go for me. And fortunately, I got a seat in gynecology after my MBBS, and that's the path I chose to pursue.
I just want to know about your journey as an MBBS student, and why did you choose gynecology? Like after you finished your internship, what pushed you into choosing gynecology?
So as an MBBS student, I spent around 7 years of my life in Sage GS Medical College and KEM Hospital in Parel. So that itself, being one of the most busiest hospitals in the country, exposed me to a lot of various specialties, fields, surgical fields. And I clearly knew that I really wanted to operate. And then seeing my mother operate, be able to deliver babies, plus being able to do gynac surgeries very efficiently and adroitly. She's quite the expert at vaginal surgeries, and she is also my idol. So I knew that I have to try to be a gynecologist, and luckily in the first attempt itself, I got a gynecology seat in Nagpur, and then I spent the next 3 years of my life for my MD in Nagpur learning to be a good doctor.
Great. We continued honing your skills, doing fellowships. So can you just help our audience with what kind of specialty you're practicing right now? Because I went through your CV, it was quite extensive.
I think honestly, Rohan, most doctors of my age right now would have just as many fellowships and certificates to their name, because as a doctor, learning doesn't stop once you complete your MD.
Sure.
There are many things, many super specialties, many subspecialties that you want to know, you have to know, and you need to know to be able to treat your patients in the best possible way, and to be able to diagnose clinically as well as more accurately. So as the treatment is more focused to the patient and not like a general USG kara lo, MRI kara lo, dekhenge. So things like, I have taken ultrasound training, I have undergone laparoscopic surgery training, I have undergone vaginal surgery training, I have undergone infertility training, and I am still doing courses, because see, machines keep innovating themselves. You can't be stuck doing sonographies on a 15-year-old machine. Surgical skills, laparoscopy sets, instruments, everything keeps innovating. So you as a doctor have to keep innovating. And I think the best part is that it's fun learning. When you don't have an exam to give, fellowships are fun because learning is fun, then.
So where do you practice right now?
So right now, I'm currently a practicing gynecologist in Matunga in central Mumbai. And I am also attached to many hospitals around there. And I try to provide as much care for my patients as I can in my clinic, along with other doctors, as well as with sonographies and surgeries. So, patients don't have to go too many places if they want or need any investigation.
So how does a day look like in the life of Dr. Asawari? You're a full-time gynecologist, you're a mom, and you have to take care of your kids, your home, as well as your clinic. So how does a normal day look like for you?
Normal day obviously starts with trying to get the kid out of bed and to school. And then I try to fit in a workout in the middle, at least 5 days a week, and then rush to the clinic, see the patients, come back, and then it's a little bit of a break before the kid is back home. And then it's quite the juggle between the kid and the work schedule, but somehow we do manage Monday to Friday. But it's busy in a fun way. And there's always a juggle happening between kid and the kid's schedule and sports, work, classes, but in a fun way. I enjoy it.
That's how you should be, like, should enjoy what you're doing. You said about fitness. So I personally am into fitness, and I always tell my colleagues as well who are doctors, they should do some kind of mobility or some kind of fitness to take care of their health. So can you just help us what kind of workouts you do or what kind of fitness you are into?
Yes, that's a really good question. Not just as a doctor, but for my patients as well. I always ask my patients to start weight training or resistance training, especially for patients who have been recently diagnosed or are a known case of polycystic ovarian disease or PCOD, because building muscles is the best way to consistently ensure that the biochemical problems that you have with PCOD are under control for a long time. It is something you can sustain without being on a permanent diet to lose weight,
Correct.
to get your out of whack hormones back on track. And long-term benefits for women once they are premenopausal and menopausal are immense. And now there are many, many hundreds of studies that prove the same, that for the mental, emotional and physical well-being of women as they age, because women age differently than men.
Correct.
So hence weight training is very, very beneficial for the overall health of women. And I tell all my women that no matter how much you weigh or how old you are, you should be weight training.
Correct. Because there was this misconception कि strength training सिर्फ मर्दों के लिए होती है और उससे आपकी body बहुत बड़ी हो जाएगी. Thank you for dispelling that notion. Strength training has a lot of benefits when it comes to overall health of a male as well as a female. Correct. So on that topic, PCOD exactly क्या होता है?
So, polycystic ovarian disease or PCOD, first of all, I would like to clarify this, that no radiologist is qualified to give you this diagnosis based only on the sonography. Since the last almost decade now, the definition of PCOD has drastically shifted from a sonography or a radiological diagnosis to more of a symptomatic and a clinical diagnosis. So only if the patient has irregular periods or has problems like acne, excess hair on the face or other parts of the body, oily skin, or any other problems due to excess of androgens or male hormones, do we diagnose PCOD. Having cyst on the ovary on sonography does not make you a PCOD patient. So do not panic. And then the second part of PCOD is that you are having these problems because you have an inherent insulin resistance. You have an inherent problem with the ovaries unable to produce only one follicle or one egg every month, but it tries to produce many, many follicles, and it's like crabs in a jar. They all pull each other back. So there is no one egg, no one follicle, no ovulation, and hence no periods. And the side effect of all those follicles is that they're all racing to grow. They all produce a lot of progesterone, which also produces a lot of male hormones or testosterone, from which estrogen is formed. But because there is no ovulation, there is no estrogen, and this excess testosterone is getting converted to other harmful testosterone chemicals in your body, which are causing all these side effects. So in PCOD, when you are doing resistance training, apart from going to all the bad places in your body and causing bad side effects, this testosterone gets diverted to your muscles, right? Because muscles in men and women need testosterone to grow. So these testosterone bioproducts will go to your muscles, help them grow, reduce from your face, skin, hair, back of the neck where it is causing pigmentation, and essentially help you get your body and your periods back on track.
So firstly, इसी को थोड़ा simplify करके, when should someone go to a gynecologist? So what is the right age?
Exactly. First of all, not every 12, 13-year-old has PCOD, because a lot of times when mothers are coming saying, 1.5 mahina ho gaya, 2 mahina ho gaya, period nahi aaya. So we wait till the age of at least 3 to 4 years after menarche. Menarche is when the periods have started. We wait for 3 to 4 years after menarche has started to quantify whether this girl is actually having irregular periods, whether she's actually having the side effects of PCOD, and then we think of taking treatment. Even then, we do not give OC pills or hormones or any other stronger form of treatment till the girl has reached 18.
Okay.
Because there is a pubertal growth spurt. So if you're going to give OC pills or any other hormones, there is a chance that the girl's height won't increase because it can cause bone fusion, right? So I tend to avoid hormones till the girl has reached 18 years old. And even then now, like I said, since the treatment paradigm is shifting more towards lifestyle changes then dosing them with OC pills and, kind of quieting everything down. And then once they stop OC pills, they're back to PCOD. So now we avoid hormones as much as possible, and definitely not till the age of 18 years. So if a 15 or a 16-year-old girl is still having irregular periods, but her menarche has started at 13 years of age, I would not panic. And I really request the mothers and the girls themselves not to panic, because give yourself some time. Some ovaries take time to grow and fall into a pattern.
Since we are on the topic of menarche, पहले तो menarche एक simple language में हमारे audience को समझाइए menarche क्या होता है, और आजकल lifestyle changes की वजह से I have seen kids who are quite younger getting their periods quite at an early age. So my question is, as parents, when should I get my kid, whether he's a preteen or a teenager, for his first visit to the gynecologist? Because prevention is often ignored by a lot of Indians. जब तक प्रॉब्लम नहीं होता हम लोग डॉक्टर के पास जाते नहीं. सो एज अ प्रिवेंटिव केयर और एज अ रूटीन चेकअप, एक बच्चे का पहला गायना अपॉइंटमेंट कब होना?
पहले तो बच्चे का पहला गायनेक अपॉइंटमेंट आजकल फर्स्ट आई वुड से वुड बी एट द टाइम टू टेक अ सर्वाइकल कैंसर वैक्सीन. सो वो 2 डोज तो आप ले लेना, बट आफ्टर दैट
सॉरी टू इंटरप्ट यू, सर्वाइकल कैंसर का वैक्सीन का एज कौन से एज से हम लोग दे सकते हैं?
So before the age of 14 years,
Okay.
only 2 doses are required, and both boys and girls should be taking it. So definitely I would recommend that when you go to the pediatrician for the booster dose of 10-11 years of the remaining vaccines, at that time now request your pediatrician कि आप cervical cancer का भी vaccine दे दीजिए, और it's over in 2 doses instead of the child himself or herself having to take the responsibility कि मुझे 3 doses लेना है when they are in their 20s or 30s and they are actually already sexually active. So that is one. Apart from that, really very few children actually need a gynec consult. Mostly girls only when they are having, like I said, menstrual problems. Usually in the first 3 to 4 years of menarche. Now menarche is when the girl's periods first start. So the first period is called menarche. Why is menarche important? Is because mainly age of menarche. And second is ki after menarche, how are the periods coming, and is it indicative of any deeper or physical or medical problem in that girl? So there are many issues that are diagnosed with menarche, or as the periods after menarche progress, we come to know कि कोई physical problem हो सकता है, or the girl has some medical problem like a bleeding disorder, very heavy periods, very severe blood loss, very severe anemia, low hemoglobin. ये सब चीज़ें पहले 1-2 साल में ही पता चल जाती है. तो कोई भी अगर ये सब प्रॉब्लम्स होती है तो डेफिनेटली गायनेक विजिट करना चाहिए, नॉट जस्ट आपके लोकल फैमिली डॉक्टर, बिकॉज द गर्ल इज ऑल्सो नॉट कंफर्टेबल, द मदर इज नॉट कंफर्टेबल टॉकिंग विथ दिस पर्सन यू हैव बीन सीइंग फॉर कफ एंड कोल्ड फॉर सो मेनी ईयर्स. तो एक गायनेक विजिट तो ऑब्वियसली करना चाहिए. दूसरा चीज़ आपने पूछा था कि मेनार्की का आजकल की जनरेशन में सिग्निफिकेंस क्या है. तो काफ़ी पेरेंट्स आते हैं, मदर्स आती है कि पहले हमको तो मेनार्की 12-13 साल की उम्र में आया था, लेकिन अभी हमको, मेरी बेटी को तो 9 साल 10 साल में ही आ गया. तो अभी ऐसा हो रहा है कि आप व्हाट्सएप, इंस्टाग्राम, हर जगह आप देख रहे होंगे कि ये दूध पियो तो इससे हो जाता है, ये दूध में ईस्ट्रोजन है, वो दूध में फलाना हार्मोन है, इसके लिए पीरियड्स जल्दी आ गया. कारण एक्चुअल वो नहीं है. दूध में हार्मोन कुड बी वन थिंग, बट द अदर प्रॉब्लम इज कि आप आपके बच्चे को दूध कितना पिला रहे हो. Studies have shown, the actual studies which have a valid conclusion have shown कि अगर आप आपके बच्चे को 150 से 200 ml दूध रोज पिला रहे हो, so then yes there is a little bit of कि वो जो काऊ को हार्मोन्स देते हैं वो आपकी बच्ची में जाके थोड़ा कुछ अगर हार्मोनली ब्रेन को स्टिमुलेट करके मेनार्की कर रहे हैं. बट द अदर मोर पॉइंट जो रिसर्च हैज थ्रोन अप इज दैट आजकल के बच्चे बहुत सिडेंट्री हो गए हैं. There is a lot of sedentary lifestyle with video games, with TV, with social media, YouTube happening. बाहर बच्चे कम खेल रहे हैं, कम एक्टिव हो रहे हैं, क्योंकि बैठ के ज़्यादा खा रहे हैं. बॉडी इज सेडेंट्री, बॉडी पे स्ट्रेस कम पड़ रहा है, और जब बॉडी पे फिजिकल स्ट्रेस कम पड़ता है, द ब्रेन इज ट्रिक्ड इनटू थिंकिंग कि दिस इज द करेक्ट टाइम फॉर अस टू मेंस्ट्रुएट बिकॉज द बॉडी इज हेल्दी, it has a good BMI, it has a good body fat percentage. तो अगर मैं अभी menstruate करूंगा तो मेरे बॉडी का कोई नुकसान नहीं होने वाला. So hence the brain which is genetically programmed at a certain BMI or at a certain we don't know the intricate complexities of the triggers, but when it feels that threshold has reached where, it feels that the body can withstand periods. It starts with the hormonal pulses, the ovaries start working and menstruation happens. Yeah, periods happen. You would see that the taller, thinner girls still are getting menarche at 12, 13, 14 years of age, but the little shorter, little obese, little healthier girls are getting menarche, yeah, menstruation early.
So we go back to the same thing, like everything that comes down to mobility and strength training.
Always, always.
Like the earlier you start as kids, put them in sports or just start working out with them, take them along for your runs and everything. The more you do that, I think more of these lifestyle issues will go.
Yes.
And since we are on the topic of puberty and teenage, you as a gynac, what kind of advice you would like to give the parents when it comes to sex education? We run two schools, but the onus of providing that sex education to the kids, I feel personally lies on the parents. And what do you think when we should have that talk with our kids about sex education, about puberty, about their changing bodies? So, what is the right age to have that conversation, and what role does a gynac play in that?
I see, first of all, I feel the name of sex education should be changed to intimacy education, because when you talk sex ed, most people think कि अरे भाई they're going to show a porn movie to the children. बच्चों को sex दिखाने वाले and हमारे बच्चों की तो बुद्धि भ्रष्ट हो जाएगी. They do not equate sex with love and intimacy. So I think sex ed just needs to be like banished, abolished.
needs to be
It just needs to go. It needs to talk about physical education and intimacy education, and how to handle physical relationships between your partners. So that is one. Secondly, I feel that talk about periods for both boys and girls need to start around 9 to 10 years of age, because like you said, menarche is starting early.
Correct.
And a lot of kids around this age have siblings who have started menstruating, or they have cousins, sisters, friends, neighbors they play with, who have started menstruating. So menstrual talk needs to be had around 9 to 10 years of age. Luckily, there are a few books, few authors who have spoken and written very beautifully about this topic for both boys and girls in a very simple language. And I feel more than telling girls that you are going to get something called periods, boys also need to be taught that, girls, are going to have periods. It is a very difficult, it is a very painful time for them. And you as a boy are expected to support them, ask them what they need, comfort them and not trouble them. You tell a 10-year-old boy that, or even a 12-year-old boy that, they will respect it. Because boys and in general kids are taught to obey instructions in school. So you give them a certain set of instructions, they will obey it. And because they will keep doing it year after year after year, by the time they're adults, it's ingrained to respect a woman who is having a periods and like not mock her or not, be looked down upon her, that, she can't do certain things because she's on her period. So respect is very important when it comes to kids, especially, early pre-adolescence or adolescence when it comes to periods. And then from there onwards, like I said, when you're going on to 12, 13, 14 years, then that is when the urges start, when there's a natural curiosity about your bodies, about this physical attraction that you may get to the opposite sex, same sex, you don't know. So then, see, this is a little tricky because most of these things nowadays, kids are going to be learning from social media or, Hollywood, Bollywood, jo bhi hai, whatever they see on screen.
But that's another problem, that too much of information.
Yeah, without proper direction. So here you have to, see, I personally believe that what kids see at home, they will propagate outside. So it is hard, easier said than done. But if they see a healthy relationship between their parents, where, kissing, hugging, holding hands is allowed, they will know that two people who love each other or are in a relationship, this is fine. Okay, this is how you express your love. So then that is the first step. Then from there it comes to, you have to be comfortable with the touch. You have to be wanting it. It shouldn't be something that is forced for both the boys and the girls, obviously, because at that age, you don't really know, what is right, what is wrong, what you want, what you don't want. So I believe that a healthy physical relationship starts at home, in the family, in the parents' bedroom, where the child is playing around the parents. And from there, then it starts, slowly that, okay, if you're attracted, do let me know. This is a good touch, this is a bad touch. Because right now, their good touch, bad touch is just limited to strangers and their private parts. But if they really want to touch somebody, then, what is the right place, what is the right touch? So these things you see and you learn. So things like hugs, kisses, pecks on the cheek, these things start at home, but a lot of people are not very, physically.
My dad never heard.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, easier said than done. But I believe it's easier for the kids to know what is right, to feel what is right, and then they will start trusting the instincts more. Because I feel in a physical relationship, even at our age, instincts speak more volumes than whatever you're chatting on the phone or whatever you're saying. Like you may say something else, but your body language may be saying something else completely. So, they need to learn to trust their own bodies. And this is something that is ever growing, because it starts when you're 12 and you are still learning when you're in your 20s that what you like, what you don't like. So with kids, it is hard. It is not impossible. It is hard, and it can't be one conversation.
Correct.
You can't say कि two people have sex, ऐसे बच्चे बनते चलो खत्म हो गया sex. Sex is over.
Over and over and over and again.
Yeah, because
So the importance of consent needs to start at an early age.
yeah, because what is comfortable for you, what you like, what you don't like, what feels right. That feel is very important. Even now, if you ask women, they will always say that he doesn't feel right, or this doesn't feel good.
The vibe is
That
off.
feel is always there. So it's there for kids also, no? Because men is like, oh, we are too macho, we don't feel, we see, we touch. But women is always about the feeling, and so are kids. In fact, nowadays, parenting is all about what the kids are feeling. So then it's always about how does this touch feel? Or how do you feel when you're with that person, right? So it needs to start from there. See, this is all, most people will say this is new age parenting, newfangled parenting, humko to kisi ne sikhaya nahi tha. But because this is new age parenting, because the world has become a very dangerous place for kids and young teenagers to be, I feel to keep them safe, this is a step that we can take.
Yeah.
We should try and, hopefully be able to guide them in the right direction.
And I think the onus lies on the immediate out inner circle as well. The friends should be aware of this. The relatives should be also made aware of this. But of course, the main responsibility is on the parents to teach these values to the kids at an early age. As far as sex education goes, not sex education, intimacy
But
education.
physical education.
All physical education goes. Teenagers, their bodies are changing. I want to talk about masturbation. How healthy is masturbation? Is it correct? And how to have that difficult talk with your kid? Because most of us millennials learned it from our friends who's like failed 3-4 classes in fifth standard. He's like the bhaiya of the school and he's misguiding everyone. But with this new age parenting, we can have actual dialogue with the kids. And if he's reading something online, he's misguided. I think, how do we have that talk? And firstly, is masturbation healthy?
Of course, masturbation is healthy. There's nothing wrong with masturbation, even for a kid or a teenager, or even for an adult. And in fact, now it is advocated that first of all, we can't just talk about masturbation without talking about sex and orgasm, right? So
Correct.
masturbation is actually your journey to orgasm. More than 60 to 70% of women do not have an orgasm with their partner at the same time during a normal sexual intercourse. So a lot of times, if the man has had an orgasm but the woman has hadn't, people who are open, who are talking about this in their bedrooms, a lot of women are using sex toys to masturbate, so they can also have their orgasm without the pressure being on the man to like make the woman come. Because obviously, much to the contrary, a lot of male partners do care that the woman also gets an orgasm, because for them it's like a good thing that, I also made my partner happy or pleasured. So a lot of times now sex toys are entering a proper balanced healthy sex sex life couples ki no, we can use this. So that is one part of it. And now, because sex life, sexual toys and all these dildos or whatever, they are really out there on Instagram, on YouTube, on social media. People are buying, girls are buying, kids are buying,
Couples are buying it.
couples are buying them, right? So the thing is that orgasm is not bad. It is definitely needed. It's a big stress reliever. The problem with masturbation and orgasms is how often are you doing it and to what are you doing it, okay? Because if you are someone who needs to masturbate or have an orgasm every day, okay, for a long time, and you feel like there's something wrong with you if you don't do it, then that definitely is a problem. If you are constantly needing to masturbate to unhealthy porn like violent porn, sadism, masochism, whatever, a lot of time, or things which are not really considered societally appropriate, and you're feeling guilty about it, you definitely should be seeing a therapist or someone who can help you out with this. But apart from that, even for children, exploring your bodies, wanting to know what an orgasm is, masturbation is absolutely fine. There is nothing wrong with it. And it is a way to know that what actually makes you happy, what you need, what you want. And it takes away the mystery from sex. So you don't have to really depend on someone and, unfortunately not the right person for you just to get an orgasm or, just to know what sex is like. So a masturbation can actually be one of the first steps, to go towards like a healthy sexual journey where you don't always need a partner, and then hopefully you're not looking for the wrong partner, right? Just to get that pleasure.
I've seen even as toddlers and kids when they touch their genitals, it's a primal instinct or probably natural instinct.
So actually, Sigmund Freud has like an entire chapter on that.
Let's not get
Let's not get into that now. But
the parents will be like, hey, don't do that, karke. But isn't that a natural instinct wherein the parents should probably explain it in a better way?
So it depends where they are doing it, and with children it is still fine. But also obviously they are stopping them because they feel that if they continue doing that behavior as an adult, it probably will be unsafe for them in the long run because you don't know who's watching, right? So that becomes a problem. It could be family, it could be strangers, it could be random people. But apart from that, I feel that talking about sex definitely should not be taboo. If you don't want to say the word sex, just say physical intimacy.
Correct.
And most people will get the hint.
Correct.
And it doesn't have to be birds and bees. There are many people out there talking about sex, masturbation, semen, vaginal discharge, practically everything under the sun.
90s, it was two flowers, right?
Yes, two flowers. But I think we learned everything from books only and novels. Like, my parents' novels, I would take and sit and read. Acha aise hota hai.
Yeah, but I think speaking of novels, reading erotica is much better option than watching violent porn because you use your imagination. You don't get any unrealistic expectations. Is what I've realized.
I think they should launch 50 Shades of Grey every millennia. So every generation should read it. So, they're like, this is fine, this is not fine. But books are, but then again, who's reading, these days?
The attention span is such, people don't have patience for books.
They don't have.
But I hope reading comes back in a big way. If you want to read, we have a lot of books over here. So,
But they're good authors. They're not going to teach you about erotic.
on the topic of masturbation, the last question I had was this No Nut November. It has a reason that it created awareness for prostate cancer. But there is also this huge trend of no fuck, wherein some people are advocating that you should not masturbate and you should preserve your semen. Is it from a
I don't know. So from a scientific perspective, absolutely not. So when we do semen analysis studies of men, husbands, partners who come for infertility, if there is a longer abstinence period of more than 2 to 3 days versus say, a semen, a person who has not had sex for 5 to 7 days, the quality of semen, the sperm deteriorates significantly. There is definitely more abnormal sperms, more deformed sperms, reduced motility. So hence now the abstinence period for someone who needs to get his semen checked for fertility purposes is only 2 to 3 days. You don't need to not have sex more than that. Not having sex and keeping the sperm in your testes is not going to increase the count, motility, fertility potential or anything of that sort. So in fact, now we say that if you're trying to have a baby, you don't need to have sex every day or every alternate day. Every third day is absolutely fine. So every third day takes the pressure off the couple, plus it is very doable and it absolutely doesn't affect the quality of the sperm.
Since we are on the topic of No Nut November, it is done to create awareness about prostate cancer. So how prevalent is prostate cancer in India, and should I be worried at what age that I should get tested?
Since I'm a gynecologist, I don't really directly handle prostate cancer cases, but I do know that so in the West, when males go for a general health checkup, per rectal examination to check for an enlarged prostate is kind of the norm after you cross a certain age. But in India, I do not see men being very happy about a prostate enlargement checkup. But usually an enlarged prostate will give you symptoms like dribbling of urine, hesitancy when passing urine, incomplete emptying, etc. And the cancer, unfortunately, will usually result in signs like, blood in the urine. So these are the symptoms which kind of, make the doctor look for an enlarged prostate. There is something called as benign prostatic hypertrophy, which is very common in older, geriatric population.
Okay.
And then some of that population gets converted to prostatic cancer. The prognosis is not very bad if caught early. It's just a removal of the prostate gland and you're done. And apart from that, really, like I said, it's all about being aware and getting the proper checkup done. Like when you go to a doctor, no one is going to offer you a cancer screening or a cancer checkup. You have to ask that, you know what, I want to get screened for breast cancer, cervical cancer, ovarian cancer. And then you have to ask, because our healthcare system is more patient driven.
Correct.
It's not a government driven initiative. It is just about services. There is no initiative by the government or any of the systems to have a healthier population. The onus of keeping yourself healthy, unfortunately, in India is on you. So you have to be aware, you have to be educated, and you have to take the first step.
So what are the other problems that especially males face after they turn, say, 45, 50? As a gynec in your practice, what problems do you see most?
Most problems that men face are unfortunately lifestyle induced problems, stress, and smoking, alcohol, less sleep. A lot of it really leading to, in my infertility practice, erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, the smoking causing really bad sperm quality and leading to infertility. These are the things which most common problems that young men face. And unfortunately, these are very prevalent, but fortunately very reversible. Sperms and semen in general is very hardy. So even like 1 or 2 months of a better lifestyle, and these lifestyle induced changes can lead to a better sperm quality. Diabetes and stress is very easy to reverse if you just improve your sleep cycle, improve your diet, have a good exercise routine in place. And apart from that, stress and anxiety is now, I think, part of everybody's life. There is no escaping that. So how you deal with it is important, and the dealing with it is what lifestyle has now become all about.
So we'll spend some time on erectile dysfunction because that is a topic which is often confused with performance anxiety as well. And also, I have seen a lot of people misuse Viagra. What is Viagra? Firstly, how to differentiate between these things, that it is just performance anxiety, because it can happen to anyone once in a while. Like you said, stress, alcohol, you just had a rough day at work. So how to look out for these things?
Also, erectile dysfunction basically means that, it is hard for the man to sustain an erection long enough for penetration and ejaculation so that the woman can get pregnant. Now, erectile dysfunction has many causes, but most of them are reversible. Very few are, have always have had an erectile dysfunction. In these primary cases, a lot of times, obviously, infertility treatments like IUI and IVF help. And the others just require a lot of counseling, sometimes more foreplay, less pressure, less stress in the bedroom. Because a lot of times when I said, like, planned relations, when the couple is trying to get pregnant, requires a lot more frequent intercourse. A lot of people with erectile dysfunction end up having sex like only once or twice a month. So then there is no pressure. But when you're trying for a baby, the pressure is on. It's like being in a pressure cooker.
Correct.
Every time the woman's period comes, and both have to perform. So that kind of pressure makes it hard for them to, after a long, hard day at work, traveling, work stress, to kind of maintain that. So sometimes then, we do give medicines. A lot of time counseling helps. But sometimes we do give some medications for the man to sustain the erection long enough for ejaculation to occur. But again, you can't just be popping Viagra off the counter.
For
Because, like if you have an undiagnosed heart condition, it's going to be
there
difficult.
are cases wherein people have died because
Yes.
this use of Viagra.
And then sometimes if you don't really need Viagra, but you think that you need to, then you can have a condition called as priapism, which is like a, painfully engorged penis. And that can be really painful. And then you may need to visit the ER to kind of take other drugs to take away the effect of the Viagra.
If you want to spoil your day, Google this condition.
So these kind of things are happening. Unfortunately, what happens is when you're reading, it's only half-baked knowledge. And for some reason, people are still very hesitant in talking about their sex lives in front of a doctor or a third non-judgmental person. I try and always counsel a patient or a couple who's come to me for infertility. The first counseling, I always try to have the husband in the room, because the wife is like, मैं कैसे husband को बताऊँ कि इतनी बार sex इतना ऐसे करना है. So I said, you know what, you get your husband, let me explain. Or sometimes it turns out that the infertility is not actually an infertility. It is just, incompatibility problem where the wife is not really comfortable having sex and the husband is like, मैं क्या करूँ, she's not in the mood. These kind of things often crop up. So as a gynac, sometimes I also play the role of a counselor where I'm giving like 30 minutes, telling the couple that a child cannot be the goal of your marriage. You first need to have a relationship. You need to figure out what works for her, because if the wife is not enjoying the sex, once she has a baby, she's going to stop enjoying it even more. And that is really going to be the end of your bedroom life. And that is not where you want to go at the age of 35, 40. Just having a child doesn't mean your sex life has to come to an end. So, I'd ask them to usually take a couple of months off, get their life back on track, and still if they don't conceive, then to come back.
On the staying on that topic, once you've delivered a child, your body goes through a lot of changes, and most of my couple friends, it takes them a lot of time, or it's quite difficult for them to resume their sex life back to how it was before the baby. So, what care or what should one look for when they have to resume their sex life after delivering a baby?
See, the
Like
mothers.
as a man, what should I take care of?
No, you should just be supportive to the mom, because she's going to be sleep deprived. She's going to be looking at herself negatively, physically, because of all the weight gain and all, everything is going to be all over the place. There's going to be some hair loss, there's going to be dark circles, there's going to be puffy skin. She's going to have scars. If you've had a normal delivery, there would be some amount of dyspareunia or painful sex, because if you get stitches down there, and for the mother in general, it takes around 6 to 8 weeks to get adjusted to being a mother, right? So expecting to have sex and, expecting the mother to be very happy about it and be like, ha, chalo, nothing's happened, is foolhardy and stupid in my opinion. You just kind of need to let the mother get back to a routine where now the baby and those sleepless nights and the breastfeeding is part of a routine. So being supportive is very, very important. And in that supportive time, if she slept well one of those days and she's not very tired and she's feeling a little good, the baby is not troubling, then maybe yes, you can initiate some form of physical intimacy, and then obviously they'll, flow into it, right? Because they are in a very vulnerable place, new mothers, or any mother for that matter.
Correct.
So being supportive, appreciative, encouraging is very important. And if you are being that system, I'm sure then your, intimate life will be back on track in no time.
ओके प्रेगनेंसी के बारे में तो बात कर ली, वो तो बाद में होती है, उसके पहले रिलेशनशिप होते हैं, शादी होती है. तो आई जस्ट वांटेड टू नो इफ आई एम गेटिंग इनटू अ रिलेशनशिप or my kid is getting into a relationship or he's getting married, what all things that one should look for? Like, I personally feel that blood work should be compulsory before you match the kundlis everything, because STDs are a real problem. And even if you're getting into a relationship with someone, this high risk behavior of not bothering, I'm in love and something. So how often should I get tested for STDs, and what are the common tests that you would recommend?
So most people think of STDs as having some blood work test, or spot test. It's not really like that. It is quite an invasive test for the woman, which requires taking a vaginal swab, sending it to the lab for culture and seeing what bacteria you have. That is the long and short of it. Or if the man or the woman has any lesions. So I firmly believe, very unorthodox, ki sexual compatibility should also be checked before you get married, and not just the kundlis. Most people now, when they have a good gap between engagement and marriage, do end up doing that.
Yes, ये तो
So it is unwritten norm जो भी है. So it's a good thing, I feel. And I am pretty sure a lot of marriages do get called up because of that incompatibility, as it should be. But apart from that, very difficult to expect that kind of honesty between partners ki, I have had many partners, so I should get myself checked, for the man or the woman, because no one wants to show that I have had a very active sexual life for fear that it will reflect on their character. So character assassination is not allowed. True colors are only to be shown after marriage, not before marriage. तो हाँ, सबके एक या दो ही बॉयफ्रेंड गर्लफ्रेंड रह चुके, उससे ज्यादा तो नहीं, वो तो झूठ बोल रहा है. So that is the thing. So my point is that if, since this kind of honesty is not possible, I would really suggest that when you start being sexually active, I tell all my female patients, because I get only female patients, that please carry a condom in your wallets or your purse. If your man is refusing to use it, you say that I will not have sex without a condom. It is as simple as that. Because अगर STD होता है तो problem males को नहीं, problem females को होती है, because simply they have a bigger responsibility to take care of. They are the ones who are going to produce children. They are the ones whose fertility gets affected, and they are the ones who get blamed if infertility happens. So using condoms is the first and last word when it comes to STD protection for men and women, and to use that. And when it comes to checking, definitely अगर आपको private parts पे कोई rash आ रहा है, blisters आ रहे हैं, painful, white discharge, itchy, definitely go to a doctor and get checked out for STDs.
That brings me to another topic which is quite ignored about genital hygiene and health. Nobody gave us that talk as kids. How you're supposed to take care of your genitals as boys, or even women for that matter. Like nobody talks about the foreskin or how you're supposed to keep your genitals clean. So how important of a role hygiene plays, whether you're sexually active or not.
So see, hygiene for men and women is different, and it is differently viewed even publicly. Women think they're not supposed to smell down there. They're not supposed to have any discharge, all of which is basically crap. You are naturally supposed to have a little bit of a vaginal odor, a little bit of a vaginal discharge with a fishy smell. You do not need to deodorize it with nicely smelling, V-washes and what washes and scents and powders and soaps. It is fine the way it is. And for men, they have absolutely been taught nothing about genital hygiene. They think everything is fine the way it is. सुबह नहा लिया बहुत हो गया. ऐसे नहीं होता है. Men carry bacteria and infections in their foreskin, prepuce and in the secretions that happen there. So they have to pull back the foreskin and clean it to make sure that they are not carrying anything, they don't get infected and they don't pass it on.
Correct.
So world views male and female genital hygiene very differently. Men think they don't need any, women think they need too much than what they actually need.
At least basic hygiene kara karo before sex, after sex also. Go wash your genitals.
No, actually, instead of hygiene, what both men and women should be doing after having sex is just simply pass urine. That by itself takes care of all and any urinary tract infections that can happen post sex because of your partner.
Don't be lazy. Go to the washroom after your sessions. Okay. So now that we matched up on days and we are sexually compatible, now comes the hard part. Is you got married and you're trying to get intimate with your partner, but the sex is quite painful. If it's their first time, or probably the girl is having a lot of pain. So how do we navigate through that? And when do we know that there's a problem? The painful sex is a legit issue, right?
Okay. So see, first, if you're especially in an arranged marriage and this is the first time you're having sex or, whatever, you feel that if you get used to it, the sex will become less painful, but it hasn't really become less painful. So one of the most common causes is, first of all, for women, sex starts in the head, right? So if the woman is still very anxious, newly married, in-laws ka pressure hai, new house, new environment, new everything, that stress kind of doesn't let her relax in bed. That is one. This stress leads to vaginal dryness, which is the most common cause of painful sex. If there is no lubrication, insertion for both the male and the female partners is really painful. So in such cases, I always tell the couples to get used to being with each other. First only, talk, get used to cuddling, coming physically close with each other, talk it out and give a lot of time to foreplay so the woman can have more secretions and sex becomes slightly less painful. If despite doing all this, sex is still very painful, then I suggest getting a gynec checkup done, because sometimes there is a condition called as a vaginal septums, which can block the penis from entering the vagina and can cause painful sex. This can only be diagnosed in a gynec's clinic, so you may have to visit the doctor once.
I think foreplay is quite underrated. Like I read this quote somewhere. Like, foreplay is like the journey, and intercourse is like the end destination. So
Yes.
don't rush into that destination. Enjoy the journey along the way. So speaking of painful sex, because of lack of lubrication, I asked a few of my colleagues to just send in questions, and one of the questions was that there's too much of lubrication, and that is causing problem. Like this couple has been in a relationship for quite a few years, and they are no longer enjoying their intercourse, especially because of too much of lubrication. Is that a legit problem, or
So no,
it's a good problem to have?
so there is no such thing as too much lubrication, but if the woman is having an abnormal excessive vaginal discharge because of chronic cervical infection, that can happen. But honestly, I think men crave lubrication. Lubricants are around for a reason. They are sold over the counter, left, right and center. I myself, the first line of treatment that I give to my patients is lubricants, because most people have never used them. Especially if you're using condoms, lubricants make it very easy for the woman as well. So no, but yes, excessive vaginal discharge can be a thing, and you can get it checked out, but it usually doesn't cause any problems like lack of pleasure. So I think it shouldn't be a problem, to be honest.
Okay. Now we've discussed this. Now let's come to what is the right age to conceive. Because I am myself 40 right now, and I used to keep getting these taunts from my relatives कि जल्दी जल्दी बच्चे पैदा कर लो, बाद में problem होती है. तो is there a right age for a woman to conceive? Because the lifestyle is such that both the partners are working. you cannot take a break from your job. And by the time we sort our finances and we are stable mentally, emotionally, and financially, it's already too late. So, what is the right age? And is there such a thing that your biology clock is ticking? Jaldi karo.
Yes. So medically, it is supposed to be 25 to 35. But now, medicine apart, social life, professional life has completely changed these rules. There is a biological clock. It is ticking, but you also do have, medicine on your side, and we are trying our best to make sure that women get the best of both worlds. Men, fortunately, do not really have too much effect on their semen until they are really old, like 60, 65. That is when their sperm DNA also starts aging. But for women, I would say that between 30 to 35, try to get in a kid if you do want one. After 35, it's not like you can't get pregnant naturally. You can. But you do also need to be in peak. If not peak, at least the, best physical fitness, best physique, best health that you can be to first of all be able to get pregnant, to have a successful treatment, and then be able to carry forward that pregnancy. So when you talk of pregnancy rates for any gynec treatment, medical treatment, or infertility, or even to get pregnant, there are two aspects. One is the pregnancy rate and one is the live birth rate. You can get pregnant, but the older you get, the more miscarriages you have. That is the rule. So age is the biggest factor when it comes to abortions and miscarriages. But if you are younger than what your actual age is, or your biological age is lesser than your actual age, even by a few years, the chances of you carrying that pregnancy to term and having an actual baby in your hands is much higher. So if you're working, you're a professional, like a high demanding job, or you're doing really well and you don't want to plan a pregnancy till you're 36, 37, do yourself a favor and make sure that you are in really good, pay attention to your physical health, to your exercise routine, your diet. Stay in as good a form as you can be. So when you do plan your pregnancy, you have the maximum chances of success.
And that brings me to another question about freezing your eggs. How helpful is that?
Egg freezing is quite the rage everywhere, but there are two aspects to egg freezing which are not really talked about. One is the age at which you freeze your eggs. Now, suppose you want to freeze your eggs at 35. You may freeze at 35 to want to get pregnant at 40, but those eggs are still 35 years old. They are not 25 years old, right? So the problems that are going to arise with a 35-year-old egg is the same as a 35-year-old woman trying to get pregnant. Second, you still have to go through the entire procedure of ICSI, of having a sperm sample and then creating an embryo. The embryo again is going to have the same problems that a 35-year-old embryo would have. Correct. So if you are planning on egg freezing, the best way to do it is try to take an early decision and have as young as possible eggs to freeze. Correct.
Not at the age of 38, 40.
Yes. And the second thing is that if you have a partner, if you have a husband and you're not planning a pregnancy together as a couple, better to freeze embryos than to freeze eggs, because the chances of getting a live birth, again a baby, from a frozen embryo is much higher than from a frozen egg. Correct. So therefore, if you are a couple planning to freeze, always freeze embryos first and then eggs. And obviously the cost for egg freezing is also a little prohibitive. So not everyone can afford it. But IVF is still much more mainstream. It is still doable. So I would always advise a couple for embryo freezing and a single woman, hopefully then start freezing your eggs a little earlier.
And now we covered almost everything, post-marriage, conceiving. Now comes the hard part about menopause. How should one prepare for menopause, and at what age? Usually, initially it was like 40, 45? No,
50.
50. Now I had seen like 40, 45 years old also.
Yes.
Again, lifestyle issue.
Lifestyle, yes, but also people are giving a lot more importance to premenopause.
Okay.
And that is a phase. And premenopause does start early for a lot of women, goes on for 8 to 10 years for some women, which is full of menstrual irregularities, mood swings, mental health issues, weight gain, bone problems, all of that. So premenopause is actually the period of your life before menopause, before your periods completely stop. Menopause is defined as when you don't get periods for 1 year. Okay. That is when you're actually menopausal. And to prepare for menopause, I had a very nice thing where things to do before you don't have to drop into menopause. You have to slide into your menopause. And to slide into your menopause, you have to take care of your health a lot in premenopause. The biggest thing is that you need more protein when you are getting premenopausal and menopause. And the other thing is that you are going to put on weight. You need to start eating less because your metabolism slows down, because your estrogen and progesterone are slowing down, right? So you need to start eating less, watch what you're eating, exercise more, put in more proteins, stay more active, and ask for help when you need it. Just because your childbearing days are over, आपको अभी बच्चे नहीं होने वाले, it doesn't matter अभी periods का क्या होता है, ऐसा नहीं होता है. Quality of life still matters. Please visit your closest gynac and have a chat about premenopause and menopause. Be mentally prepared for it. Menopause for some can be very challenging. For some it can be a breeze. So if it's challenging for you, please seek help.
Great. I think we covered almost most of the topics. I would just like to ask a few quick fire questions. So these are the questions that were sent by my colleagues. And the first question was how legit or how helpful are aesthetic surgeries, for example, vaginal tightening and hymen repair surgeries, and do they improve the sex life or overall?
See, for some women who have had many vaginal deliveries, vaginal laxity and, pelvic floor weakness is a thing. So for these women, yes, to increase their sexual pleasure, vaginal tightening surgery can be done. But the problem is now, girls are getting this done for no reason because they believe that, it should look nice and not just feel nice. And unfortunately, that is how cosmetic surgery has taken off in the US as well, where girls as young as 24 and 25
Oh God.
are getting labioplasties because they want to wear these tight, leggings and not have it look bad. But I personally believe that that is just, forgive the language, but crap. Vaginal tightening can be an option, but see, the thing is that the only thing that is going to give a permanent solution is a surgery, which is recommended for people who have, young women who have given multiple vaginal births and they do maybe just want like a better pelvic floor, because a weaker pelvic floor going ahead can also cause incontinence of stools and urine. But it has been marketed as get a better sex life, tighten your vagina. So what I want to put here is that all these aesthetic surgeries, most are non-invasive, non-surgical, without stitches, using lasers and PRP infusions, and they are temporary. Nothing is permanent. It's not like laser hair reduction, ki kar liya and you get a temporary, like a permanent fix. It doesn't work like that. Vagina is a muscle at the end of the day. You use that muscle, it is going to relax. If you stop lifting weights, it hurts when you go to the gym after 2 weeks. The same is with the vagina. Permanently kuch nahi hota hai. If the muscle is not getting used, it will get tight. Sex will be better if you don't have it for 1 month. But if you're having it regularly, it is going to loosen after a while. That is one thing. And the other PRP procedures, like, injecting PRP practically everywhere in your pelvis.
For hair loss.
For everything all over your body. It is temporary. The effect does not last for more than a few weeks for everything. Be it your hair, skin, vagina, your clitoris. It is a very temporary solution. It is, for some people, it has proved beneficial. For some, it hasn't. There are studies which are very, very ambiguous on the actual benefits of PRP infusion. So you take a call depending upon what works for you. And if you really want to try, feel free. There are no harms, but please do not expect permanent benefits either.
And what about Kegels exercise?
Kegels is very good, especially for women who have given birth vaginally. All of them should do Kegels because pelvic floor laxity after vaginal birth is a known problem, especially in those who have been pushing for a long time, who have had long labors and have had, vaginal incisions. So definitely Kegels is a must do. It is very easy to do. It's like a 6 or 3 second count exercise, can be done sitting, doing practically anything, any chore, any job under the sun, and should be done by everyone.
The next question is, what are the other options for contraceptives for young unmarried women or?
For young unmarried women, no, of course. If I'm telling my patients to carry condoms, if your partner is not using, I am the no judgment gynac. I will not judge. But honestly, if you ask me, for young unmarried women, I will always suggest condoms. Because they protect you from pregnancy, they protect you from HIV, HBsAg, they protect you from a host of other sexually transmitted diseases. It is the single most, important contraceptive for young unmarried girls in India. If you are in a monogamous relationship with a live-in partner where you know that nobody is sleeping with anyone else, then birth control pills are a good option. But birth control pills do also have sometimes the side effect of reduced libido and vaginal dryness. Sex may not be as enjoyable to you. But if you're a young girl or a young woman who is planning on like a late marriage or, busy working in a monogamous relationship, birth control pills will help you regulate your cycle. They will take care of ovarian cysts. They will take care of breast cysts, fibrocystic disease of the breast, and by essence reduce the risk of breast and ovarian cancer by a little bit. They are helpful in their own sense. If you have severe PMS, if you have severe menstrual cramps, birth control pills are a boon to such girls. So then that is the second option. And then the third option, again, if you're in a monogamous relationship, would be a intrauterine copper device. I don't generally recommend because they can cause irregular menstruation. Inserting an IUCD in a young, person, a woman who has not given birth is a little bit painful. It's quite an invasive procedure, although it is an OPD procedure. It can sometimes cause infections, but not always. And because it's what we call a non-pregnant uterus, it does sometimes tend to expel out the copper T, the IUCD, and the woman doesn't come to know about it. Apart from that, other contraceptives available on the market are just different forms of the same hormones that birth control pills contain. So I don't generally advise them. So these three are like my top choices for young women who are sexually active.
Another question that was asked is the fear of pap smears. Like, how often should one get a pap smear done? Yearly, or when should one get it? Why is there fear associated
Yes,
with it?
pap smear again is an invasive procedure. It is not easy for someone to let go of their modesty and go to a gynec and say, do my paps. It can be a painful procedure if you're not really sexually active. And even if it does take only like a minute or minute and a half, it is still, like I said, requires a lot of relaxation on the woman's part. So you can start doing a pap smear at the age of 35. If your pap smear is normal, one paps every 3 years is fine.
Okay, great. And what about HPV vaccines, like
Yes.
late doses? Like you mentioned the basic.
So earlier there was a cutoff for 40, 35, 40 for HPV vaccine. Now we have increased the cutoff to 45 years of age. So practically everyone can take the HPV vaccine. About the age of 14 years, 3 doses have to be taken at an interval of 0, 2 and 6 months. And usually there are 2 brands that we are giving now. One is Cervarix and one is Gardasil or Cervarix. And so they are very easily available at every gynec's clinic. And only thing is that we avoid getting pregnant on when you're giving these vaccines because they're live vaccines. And apart from that, you just have to just go and take your first dose and start. They will not affect your periods. They will not affect your fertility. They will not give you headaches, and they will not cause every problem under the sun. These are very safe vaccines that we give to young children also.
Last question: PCOD versus PCOS. What is the difference? This is a
It is
common misconception.
actually the same thing. So PCOS is basically polycystic ovarian syndrome and polycystic ovarian disease. It is actually the same thing. What actually PCOD does lead to sometimes is the syndrome called metabolic syndrome or syndrome metabolic X, what is called. But apart from that, basically disease and syndrome is the same thing. PCOD has become too notorious. Everything is attributed to
Everyone is
PCOD. Everyone is
self-diagnosing.
self-diagnosing themselves with PCOD. And then they do get a random scan and say, I have PCOD. Like I spoke in the beginning, there are only 2 criteria for PCOD. One is hyperandrogenism or excess of male hormones. And second is period irregularities. That's it.
Any parting words you would like to tell our audience?
Your health is in your own hands. Do not hesitate to ask questions, seek help, and stay healthier because the onus is always on you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Asawari. That I think we need a part 2 for sure because we covered almost everything. Still,
No, you still left half of my textbook. My textbook is still left.
okay. Last question before we wrap up. How was the coffee?
Coffee was great. I loved it. Thank you.
Thank you. So with the magic of editing, this is now in my hands, and we can't afford a hamper like Karan yours, but this is like a small token of appreciation, Dr.
Thank you
Pathak.
so much.
It was a pleasure meeting you.
Same here.
This, conversation.
Thank you.
And that's it. Bye bye.
All these sex talks will give you more views. I just avoid talking about it. मैं तो